Izumi, notwithstanding that we're not expecting a huge surprise in today's GDP print, it is just the final reading after all. What are the biggest challenges for whoever takes the role as the next Japanese leader?
Thanks very much and good morning. So I think absolutely whoever is chosen as the LDP leader and new prime minister, the first and foremost task he or she is going to face is going to be the managing the risks of COVID against the economic reopening. You know, Japan is coming out of its Delta-driven fifth wave right now. And now the government, you know, with vaccination rates up, about 60% of the population has received one dose, the government is starting to talk about the reopening milestones and the strategy here. And they're expected to finalize a document that talks about gradual lifting of recommended curbs on activity in October going into November. But, you know, if the Delta variant and these variants are very transmissible, so they're going to have to be careful and you know, do things one step at a time.
The misstep, it seems, for the Suga administration was really the misbalancing of between handling the coronavirus outbreak, the Delta outbreak, and also safeguarding economic growth. What tweaks will need to happen for the next leader to be able to get that balance right? Or does it really just naturally help that at that point we're going to see a higher vaccination level?
Well, I think another thing that's been a big bottleneck in Japan's coronavirus response is medical system capacity. You know, Japan has the highest per capita hospital beds in the OECD. Yet, due to some coordination problems, many of these beds are not available for COVID patients, and that's what led to this, you know, the fifth wave being so scary in places like Tokyo and Osaka. So I think addressing medical system capacity is another. You know, I think having development of effective treatments will be also a very important step in shoring up confidence. And we have a big elderly population that's going to be uncomfortable going out if there's even a little bit of a threat that they could get very sick due to this virus. So hospital system capacity, effective treatments, and then just better signaling and communications from the government. These three steps, I think, are important.
How much in terms of government support can we expect in the form of fiscal stimulus?
So the government is almost, you know, certain to compile another economic package after the lower house elections, which would follow the LDP leadership elections. And there's a lot of numbers throwing around. You know, probably it's going to be in the tens of trillions of yen, focused on supporting consumption and businesses. We don't know the exact details yet. That's going to be dependent on the leader.
What are we seeing right now in terms of corporate sentiment with everything that's going on in the Delta variant side of things, not to mention already existing fiscal stimulus in the economy?
Well, on the corporate side of things, it continues to be a bit of a K-shaped recovery. You know, we have manufacturers doing quite well. Of course, there are the issues with supply side bottlenecks, especially in the auto sector, but generally the global trade and investment demand is very, very strong. So manufacturers are doing well. Large firms are largely doing well. It's really the non-manufacturers, especially in in-person services like travel and restaurants, and then the SMEs that are struggling. So this is the part of the economy that needs to get better, you know, where the reopening is going to help.
Izumi, we are now getting those second quarter GDP final numbers, and they're coming in above expectations. Growth of 1.9% annualized for the second quarter. This is also an upgrade from the preliminary numbers that came in at 1.3%. And of course, it's also a bounce back from that 3.7% drop in the first quarter. We are talking about the headline numbers quarter on quarter, also above expectations, growth of 0.5%. We are seeing a revision upwards, not only for business spending, which we were expecting to be revised upwards, but this has also come in above expectations at growth of 2.3%, but also private consumption coming in above expectations with growth of 0.9% quarter on quarter. So Izumi, just give us, first of all, your reaction to these numbers that by the looks of it, seem better than what most people had expected.
Yeah, it's a little bit better than expected. The old number was 1.3% annualized. We're talking about 1.9%. I'm encouraged by the fact that CapEx, was as strong as the preliminary prints suggested. So it does look like the CapEx side is doing well, and that's going to be important for the recovery into 2022. I think, this isn't a great number, though, in the context of things, given how weak growth was in the first quarter. And generally speaking, in the third quarter, unfortunately, we do think near-term headwinds are persisting. So on one hand, you have the supply-side disruptions from the Delta variant really hitting auto production hard, especially in September. So I think IP and export side, manufacturing might struggle a little bit. And then on consumption, yeah, it's a little bit backward-looking, but we were in the midst of a pretty serious Delta-driven fifth wave, which crimped services spending in August and probably into September as well. So third quarter growth prints also going to be weak, possibly negative. So you got flat growth for the first 3 quarters of the year. So this is, it just shows that Japan was really hit hard by the ongoing COVID outbreak. But things should get better at the end of the year into next year.
When it comes to what the BOJ can do, we had an interesting insight from the former deputy governor of the BOJ just before Kuroda. Of course, we're talking about the deputy governor, Hirohito Yamaguchi, and he actually said, look, there needs to be a reality check, right? They're probably never going to get to 2% inflation. They're stuck in this endless loop of as much as they can throw in terms of stimulus. Are they better off just establishing a lower, more realistic price target? Is that even possible, and what would that communicate?
Well, I absolutely think it's not a good idea to consider something like that at this juncture. Right? Remember, we're in the midst of the COVID shock. Headline inflation reading is negative, albeit for idiosyncratic reasons. And what's the rush? What is the benefit of having that discussion right now and risking sharp tightening of financial conditions and an appreciation of the yen? And we can have that discussion, I think, once the economy fully recovers.
Yeah.
But now we're not at that stage. Even the Fed is not at that stage.